April 20th, 1966. A street corner outside the Manhattan Tap Room in Cleveland, Ohio. A man is on the ground, face down on the pavement. He is not moving anymore. But the man standing over him will not stop. He is kicking him in the head over and over with a .357 Magnum in his right hand. Every time his foot connects, the man on the ground's skull bounces off the asphalt like a rubber ball. Two Cleveland police detectives are driving past. They see it happening. They slam the brakes. They jump out of the car and rush toward the scene. One of them, Detective Robert Tunn, later described what he saw. A man standing over a body, a gun in his right hand, kicking a helpless man in the face and head. They screamed at him to stop. They ordered him to drop the weapon. He tossed the gun on the trunk of a nearby car. And then, while the two officers were standing right there, he got in one last kick to the face. The man on the ground was named Sam Garrett. He was small. He was a user. He was sick. And he owed $600. His last words, according to witnesses, were, "I'll give you the money, Don." He never regained consciousness. He died 5 days later. The man who stomped him to death would be convicted of second-degree murder. He would serve less than 4 years in prison. He would be pardoned by the governor of Ohio. And then he would go on to become the most powerful man in the history of boxing. His name is Don King. And this is the part of the story that boxing does not want you to remember. Don King was born on August 20th, 1931, in Cleveland, Ohio. He was the fifth of 6 children. His father, Clarence King, worked at the Otis Steel Plant. Hot, dangerous work. The kind of job that broke men in half. On December 7th, 1941, the same day Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, a ladle at the steel plant exploded. Molten steel engulfed Clarence King. He died at work. Don was 10 years old. His mother, Hattie, received $10,000 in compensation. She used it to move the family out of the ghetto and into the middle-class Mount Pleasant neighborhood. But when the money ran out, she needed income. She baked pies, roasted peanuts, and her sons, including Don, sold them door to door. Here is the detail that changed everything. As a sales gimmick, Don and his brothers started slipping a lucky number into each bag of peanuts. The local gamblers loved it. Those bags became the hottest item in the neighborhood, not because of the peanuts, but because of the numbers inside. That is how Don King met the gambling world. He was a child selling peanuts with lucky numbers tucked inside. By the time he was 20, he was no longer selling peanuts. He was running the numbers. By his early 20s, Don King controlled one of the biggest numbers rackets in Cleveland. The numbers game was simple. You bet on a 3-digit number, and if it hit, you got paid at 600 to 1. A dime could win you $60. A dollar could win you 600. In neighborhoods where most people were broke, that kind of return was irresistible. And the beauty of the numbers game, for the man running it, was that the odds were always in the house's favor. Most people lost. The few who won got paid just enough to keep everyone else betting. It was a machine designed to extract money from people who had almost none. And Don King ran that machine better than anyone in Cleveland. He was a natural. He was charismatic, loud, fearless, and he had an almost supernatural memory. According to people who worked with him, he could memorize thousands of bets without writing anything down. No paper trail, no records for the police to find, no slips of paper in a drawer, just his mind. That's what kept him ahead of the cops, while his competitors got caught with evidence. He was arrested at least 35 times between his early 20s and the killing of Sam Garrett. 35 arrests, gambling, carrying a concealed weapon, assault, and battery. And every time he walked, he talked his way out. He paid his way out. He intimidated his way out. By 30, he was one of the Big Five, the top numbers operators in Greater Cleveland. He drove flashy cars. He wore flashy clothes. The streets called him Cadillac Slim. He also carried a .357 Magnum in his belt, and he was making enemies. December 1954. Don King was 23 years old. A man named Hillary Brown walked into one of King's gambling houses with the intention of robbing it. King was inside. He saw Brown, and he shot him in the back. Brown died. King claimed self-defense. The court reviewed the circumstances, a man robbing a gambling house, the owner defending his property, and ruled it a justifiable homicide. King walked free. That was the first man Don King killed. He was 23. The message was received by everyone in Cleveland's underworld. Don King will kill you if you cross him. But not everyone got the message. In 1957, a Cleveland gangster named Shondor Burns decided Don King was not paying enough tribute. Burns was the most feared mobster in Cleveland, a Hungarian-born racketeer who ran prostitution, theft, and gambling across the city. The newspapers called him public enemy number one. He demanded that King and the other top numbers operators each pay him $200 a week for protection. King paid for a while, then he stopped. At 3:45 a.m. on May 20th, 1957, a bomb destroyed the front porch of Don King's house. King went to the police. He told them that Shondor was one of the 5 pistols who bombed him. Charges were filed and Burns was arrested. But before King could testify, someone tried to make sure he never would. In October 1957, Don King was ambushed outside his home. A man in the back seat of a car aimed a 12-gauge shotgun at King's head and pulled the trigger. The blast hit him in the back of the head and neck. Don King survived. A CAT scan taken decades later, in 2001 after a turbulent airplane flight, revealed that Don King still had shotgun pellets lodged in his skull. He had been carrying the evidence of that hit attempt in his head for over 40 years. King testified against Burns, but he was a poor witness. The jury hung, and Burns walked free. Don King went back to running numbers with pellets in his skull and a lesson he would never forget. Trust nobody, fear nobody, and always be the most dangerous person in the room. April 20th, 1966. Sam Garrett was a former employee of Don King's numbers operation. He was small, he was a user, he was sick, and he owed Don King $600 from a gambling debt. King said the debt was $900. Garrett said $600. It didn't matter. The amount wasn't the point. The disrespect was the point. King walked into the Manhattan Tap Room, a bar in Cleveland where he conducted business, and saw Garrett. Words were exchanged. The argument moved outside. What happened next was witnessed by multiple people, including 2 police detectives. King pistol-whipped Garrett, knocked him to the ground, and then began stomping on his head, kicking his face into the pavement, over and over and over. Detective Robert Ton described seeing a man's head bouncing off the asphalt pavement like a rubber ball. He saw King standing over the body with a gun in his right hand, delivering kick after kick to a man who was no longer fighting back. The 2 detectives rushed in. They ordered King to drop the weapon. He tossed the .357 caliber gun onto the trunk of a nearby car. And then, with 2 police officers standing right there, watching, Don King kicked Sam Garrett in the face one last time. Garrett never woke up. He died 5 days later of severe head trauma. His last words on that sidewalk were, "I'll give you the money, Don." $600. That's what a man's life was worth on a Cleveland street corner in 1966. Don King was charged with second-degree murder. At trial, he claimed self-defense. He said Garrett followed him out of the bar and threatened his life. He said Garrett came at him first. He said he only used his left hand to punch, never stomped, and never used the gun. The two detectives who actually saw the beating told a different story. Detective Tony testified that King was kicking a helpless man in the head while holding a revolver. He said that even after being ordered to stop, King got in one more kick. The jury, 8 women and 4 men, deliberated for 4 hours. They found Don King guilty of second-degree murder. That carried a potential sentence of life in prison. But something happened between the verdict and the sentencing. 5 months later, Judge Hugh Corrigan reduced the conviction from second-degree murder to voluntary manslaughter. Journalist Jack Newfield, who wrote the biography Only in America, The Life and Crimes of Don King, alleged that Judge Corrigan was under the influence of organized crime. The sentence was 1 to 20 years. Don King served 3 years and 11 months at the Marion Correctional Institution. Less than 4 years for stomping a man's head on a sidewalk until he died, while 2 police officers watched. King would later call prison the best thing that ever happened to him. He said, "I was sent to serve time. I made the time serve me." At Marion, King read everything he could get his hands on: philosophy, history, law, literature. The man who had dropped out of college after 1 year, who had spent his entire adult life running numbers and carrying a .357 caliber revolver, educated himself in a prison library. He came out in 1971 a different man, or at least a man with different tools. The hustle was the same. The ambition was the same. The willingness to destroy anyone who stood in his way, that was the same too. But now he had vocabulary. He had references. He had the ability to walk into a room full of educated men and make them believe he belonged there. He also adopted a new hairstyle, the gravity-defying shock of hair that would become his trademark. He claimed it happened on its own, a sign from God. Don King came out of prison looking for a new racket, and he found the biggest one in America. In 1972, Forest City Hospital, Cleveland's only black hospital, was about to shut down. It needed money desperately. King saw an opportunity, not charity, opportunity. He knew a singer named Lloyd Price. Price knew Muhammad Ali. King convinced Ali to come to Cleveland and fight a 10-round exhibition against 4 different opponents to raise money for the hospital. The event raised $80,000. The hospital was saved. But more importantly, Don King discovered something that night. He watched the money come in. He watched the crowd. He watched the energy. And he realized that boxing was the numbers game on a global scale. Big bets, big payoffs, and the house always wins. He decided right there that he would become a boxing promoter. Within 2 years, he would promote the biggest fight in the history of the sport. 1974, Kinshasa, Zaire. Muhammad Ali versus George Foreman. The Rumble in the Jungle. The most famous boxing match ever held. Don King promoted it. Every other promoter in the world wanted this fight. Bob Arum wanted it. Every major promotional outfit in boxing wanted their name on it, but Don King, a convicted killer who had been out of prison for only 3 years, outmaneuvered all of them. He secured a $10 million purse, the largest in boxing history at that time, through an arrangement with the government of Zaire. President Mobutu put up the money because he wanted the world to see Africa as powerful, modern, and relevant. And Don King was the man who convinced him. Think about what this means. In 1966, Don King was stomping a man's head on a Cleveland sidewalk over $600. In 1974, 8 years later, He was standing in Kinshasa, Zaire, orchestrating a $10 million event between the two most famous athletes on the planet. That's not a comeback. That's a mutation. Ali knocked out Foreman in the 8th round. It became one of the defining moments in sports history. And Don King, the man who had stomped Sam Garrett to death, was standing in the ring when it happened. A year later, he promoted the Thrilla in Manila, Ali versus Frazier, another all-time classic. Then came Larry Holmes, then Roberto Duran, then Mike Tyson, then Evander Holyfield, then Lennox Lewis. Don King promoted over 500 world championship fights. He promoted the Jacksons' 1984 Victory Tour. He became one of the most recognizable figures in America. The hair, the voice, the American flags, the Only in America catchphrase. And underneath all of it, Sam Garrett's head bouncing off a Cleveland sidewalk. Don King didn't just promote fighters, he consumed them. The pattern was always the same. King would sign a young fighter. He would promote the fights. He would control the television deals, the venue contracts, the purse negotiations. The fighter would see a fraction of the money, and by the time the fighter realized what was happening, King had already locked him into contracts that a team of lawyers could not untangle. Control was built into the system. Mike Tyson sued King for $100 million, alleging King had cheated him out of tens of millions in earnings. Tyson said that Don King did more bad to black fighters than any white promoter in the history of boxing. Think about that sentence. The most famous black boxer of a generation, a man who grew up in Brownsville, Brooklyn, who understood racism and exploitation in his bones, looked at Don King, a black man, and said he was worse than every white promoter who ever lived. In his autobiography, Tyson described beating King on 2 separate occasions. In one incident, Tyson kicked King in the head while they were driving on the highway, causing King to swerve off the road onto the median. Tyson wrote about it with something close to joy. Larry Holmes, one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, accused King of threatening to break his legs. Holmes fought for King for years. He said King robbed him of millions. Lennox Lewis sued King. Tim Witherspoon sued King. Terry Norris sued King. Chris Bird sued King. Meldrick Taylor sued King. The list goes on and on. Fighter after fighter, lawsuit after lawsuit. King was sued more than any other person in the history of boxing. He never went back to prison. In 1992, during a United States Senate investigation into organized crime in boxing, Don King was asked about his relationship with John Gotti, the boss of the Gambino crime family. King invoked the Fifth Amendment. He refused to answer. The FBI had been watching King for years. In the early 1980s, they launched Operation Shadowboxing, a 4-year investigation into organized crime's infiltration of professional boxing, with Don King as the primary target. Agents documented meetings between King and high-ranking mob figures. An undercover FBI agent posing as a drug dealer connected to the Gambinos got close to King's operation. Despite years of investigation, King was never indicted for mob-related crimes. Investigations produced evidence, but not indictments. When the president of the International Boxing Federation, Robert W. Lee Sr., was indicted for racketeering in 1999, prosecutors called Don King an unindicted co-conspirator who was the principal beneficiary of Lee's machinations. Unindicted, co-conspirator, principal beneficiary. That is the legal system's way of saying, we know what you did, we just cannot prove it. Don King is 94 years old. He killed 2 men. He served less than 4 years in prison. He was bombed. He was shot in the head with a shotgun. He still has the pellets in his skull. He was investigated by the FBI for 4 years. He was questioned by the United States Senate about his relationship with John Gotti. He was sued by nearly every major fighter he ever promoted. He was called the worst thing to happen to black boxing by Mike Tyson, one of the most famous black athletes in history. And he is still free, still promoting fights, still walking around with that hair and that voice and that American flag, still saying only in America like it is a celebration and not an indictment. Sam Garrett's family never saw justice. A man owed $600. His head was bounced off a sidewalk like a rubber ball while he begged for his life. His last words were, "I will give you the money, Don." And the man who killed him went on to promote Muhammad Ali, Mike Tyson, and George Foreman. He went on to make hundreds of millions of dollars. He went on to shake hands with presidents. Hillary Brown was shot in the back in 1954. It was ruled justifiable. His name is a footnote. Most people who know Don King's name have never heard Hillary Brown's. The governor of Ohio pardoned Don King. The boxing world made him rich. The entertainment world made him famous. And the legal system, the same system that gives young black men decades for selling product on a corner, gave Don King 3 years and 11 months for stomping a man to death while 2 police officers watched. That's the criminal past that boxing doesn't want you to think about. If you think about it too long, you start to realize something. Don King didn't leave the numbers game when he went to prison. He just found a bigger one, a legal one, where the bets are millions instead of dimes, where the fighters are the gamblers, and the house always wins. And the house is Don King. It always has been.